Eyewitness 12 at 7, and entertainment tonight will not be seen this evening due to the following special presentation.
Go ahead. Where's the fire, Hart? Beverly Hills. County, I hate to run the county short of ambulances, but I need oxygen up here. I got 100 people in that building. I can't get them out. The air unit is about ready to collapse. Clear the building. Clear the building.
It's a legitimate question to ask, why are we doing this at all? Why are we memorializing such a disaster? Is there something morbid in our remembering? I don't think so. I think it boils down to that old saying, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. There's a whole generation of young nightclub goers who have grown up since Beverly Hills. They don't know about this. It's important that we tell them exactly what happened, the precise sequence of events, so that it won't happen again.
I don't believe this. I don't believe what this is. You know where we are? We just went, I think, we just went past the main bar. Mm-hmm. This should be the cafe where the restaurant was. Over there would be, what they call it, the Empire Room? Big room where they had banquets. Mm-hmm. Over there would be Viennese room, cabaret.
Cabaret is still out here.
I think it's back there somewhere. That's the garden room over here.
There were 2 waitresses and the bartender from the cabaret room. They didn't make it out either.
The musicians, how many? 4, 5, 6 musicians?
Including a musical arranger for
John
Mr. Davidson, who went back inside to try to get some music.
To get the arrangements, can you believe them? Well.
And all the people were just laid out just over here in 2 rows.
It was a pleasant spring evening, May 28, 1977. John Davidson was the main attraction at Beverly Hills, scheduled for 2 shows that night. By some accounts, nearly 3,000 people were in the various lavish rooms at the supper club that night. By 8:30, most had been seated in the cabaret room for Davidson's first performance. 1,200 to 1,300 in that room alone by some estimates, later considered by some to be almost twice what the room could safely hold.
We had several people at our table. I think there were 9, and we were elbow to elbow, extremely crowded.
The legs of the chairs were very close and intertwined. They were actually bumping each other, and the cocktail hostesses were having a great amount of difficulty just going through the area, taking drinks, orders for drinks.
Miss King, the guidance counselor, she asked when we first were seated where the fire exits were. She was terribly afraid of fire.
We interrupted the girls and said to them, if anything happens here tonight, we're going for that door right up here. And little did we know that in an hour or so we would be making an effort to get out that door.
Between 8:45 and 8:50, a fire was discovered in the Zebra Room. Employees tried to fight it before calling the fire department. Patrons in the main bar saw the smoke and went out the front door. The cafe room, the Viennese room, the Empire and the garden rooms, all notified almost simultaneously. In the Crystal Room on the second floor, thick smoke filled the stairway, so patrons had to escape through a serviceway to the kitchen. Almost all of them. 2 women in dressing rooms above the Zebra Room preparing for a fashion show did not get out. 9:01. The fire department was called. The first units arrived at 9:04. 2 minutes later, patrons in the cabaret room are warned.
I saw smoke coming from the zebra room doors. Never really saw fire until I got outside the building itself. At that point, when I had seen the smoke, I went directly to the cabaret room.
The stand-up comics, I guess you call them, were going through their routine, and the crowd was getting into the, into the jokes and such.
Walter Bailey came in and during the Teeter and McDonald comedian warm-up act, and very deliberately took the microphone.
He said something to the effect that there was a small grease fire in the kitchen.
I asked them to leave. I pointed out the exits.
I envisioned like a skillet and a fire would come up, like you have at home.
We did, in fact, link arms and started moving very directly toward that exit. And there were a lot of people who took it very lightly and didn't budge.
At the beginning, it was very orderly.
I remember one time looking over my shoulder and I could see fire running down the hall.
When people saw this and heard that, why, they then began to rush and push and shove.
I didn't see how I could possibly get out because I could see how slow the crowd was going. I knew how far back I was, and there was just a little door. You could just tell I wasn't going to get out in a long time.
Kenny Scarce had tipped a hostess $20 to get close to the stage, and as it turned out, close to exit B, where his party got out. Linda Holly, Ken Hackler, and most patrons in the cabaret room surged toward the double doors of exit A as black smoke enveloped them. But getting to the doors didn't mean getting out.
Here I was in a hall, and thank goodness it was still daylight out, because what I saw was like a blue, it was powder blue. I'll remember that. It was just like a powder blue patch, and so I went in that direction, and here come to find out that was the sky. All the smoke had come around, and because I saw that, I turned left and was able to get out of the building. There was like a little hallway there, and if I had turned right, that's where a lot of people got trapped and died.
I want all Covington squads available to respond to this address. If there's anyone who identifies himself as a doctor or as a nurse, please permit them to come by, okay?
Our major story this evening, maybe the major story we've had in Cincinnati for a long time, the story of death and Holocaust at Beverly Hills Supper Club south of Newport in northern Kentucky.
But as you can see, here comes... It's a man who's been injured. A man who's been injured here at the Beverly Hills. They are still taking out people.
Well, I didn't know at the time anybody had made it, and I think you're in such a state of shock, you weren't really sure what was going on.
Bring your squad up behind the building. We need all ambulance as possible. As we look behind us, the flames are clearly visible through the top of the building. The word we get from the top of the hill is that it's a complete ball of fire on the inside. There's very little hope of saving anything.
We got out and went down and stood back for no more than 30 seconds and watched other people being hurried out the exit. And in no more than 30 seconds, the fire did explode through that door. My wife and the other girl did administer CPR to many people who were brought right out there.
Attention, all units with walkie-talkies. The inner unit is about ready to collapse. Clear the building. Clear the building. Well, as you can see, the side of the Beverly Hills has just collapsed, one portion of the building. And we have an update on the number of people who have been killed in this tragedy out here. The funeral director at one of the funeral homes, Mr. Grubbs, tells us at least 100. What's it seem like? I just came from the scene, and there's bodies stacked like cordwood, and there are a lot of deaths. It's really a tragedy. I didn't expect this.
The only people that realized how bad it was were the people, the last ones to escape out of the room. They were fighting for their breath and for their life to get out.
I need oxygen up here. I got 100 people in that building. I can't get them out. Let's get 400A down here with oxygen. 400A. We were in there in the cabaret room. It was right there in the cabaret room, and you couldn't really see the whole thing because it was pretty dark, but there was just people laying all over the place. I was praying for people, asking God to have mercy on them, whether they were Christian or whatever religion they were. Plan 451. They got word up and we're going to have the squads come out and back in. We got better than 200 people back here. won't believe this. They have brought up a Army truck, and they're taking the bodies and putting it on the truck now. There are 2 rows.
Howard's a little overcome. It's easy to be overcome. The bodies are laid out here, 2 rows of them, more on top of the hill. They've brought in a truck from the Army base over in Fort Thomas, and they're preparing to load the victims up and take them out.
A second Army truck was called, and a third. Bodies were hauled to a makeshift morgue at the Armory in Fort Thomas.
Each turn threatening to confirm a truth everyone wanted to deny.
This is it. This is where we... Oh, my. Oh, gee. Jeez, and all the chairs that were here.
Yeah, and the garden thing came out over here.
That's right. The garden room, too. Here's the bricks from the building.
Yeah. And here's... What to say out of the cabaret room.
And the shingles.
This is where this is where the bodies were.
Can't see over there. This is it.
I like this place, Howard. I like it.
How long will you be here today and tomorrow?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm sorry, but I just don't know at this time, depending on what we see.
Attorney Stan Chesley filed a lawsuit on behalf of a Beverly Hills victim and got a court order to stop the state from demolishing the building. Then his experts found old technology aluminum wiring of the building. A jury was later to say that that's what caused the fire. But it's not what caused the large loss of life. A National Fire Protection Association study concluded that was caused because there were no automatic sprinkler systems throughout the building, although not required by law. There was overcrowding, particularly in the cabaret room. There were not enough exits. There was a failure to call the fire department or evacuate customers while staff attempted to put out the fire. A governor's report placed major blame on both the owners of the club and State Fire Marshal Warren Southworth.
I don't have the original set of plans, and I have no idea at this point how many people was in the building at that night.
How many people was legally capable of being in there?
This we don't know either. This is still to be answered.
The governor's investigation concluded the fire marshal's office knew of fire hazards at Beverly Hills and did not conduct proper inspections. As a result, the governor suspended Fire Marshal Southworth for 1 month with pay. Governor Carroll also blamed the Schilling family, owner of Beverly Hills.
There was only about half as many exits as the law required. The wiring was done in total violation of the code. As a matter of fact, the electrician himself stated that he was instructed by the owners not to use the materials that were in compliance with the code.
Richard Schilling and his sons had never spoken publicly about the fire, but the governor's report prompted them to gather around their attorney as he read a statement criticizing the governor.
His remarks were not only unwarranted, but were also defamatory, scurrilous, irresponsible, and unprofessional.
We want to know why the fire started, how it could have spread so quickly, and to prevent anything like this ever happening again.
Our letters that we had received from the Commonwealth of Kentucky had stated at all times the building of Beverly Hills met all fire and building codes and was in total compliance. We depended 100% on them. Probably what that event's done to me personally as a public official is now to become a doubter.
The law in Kentucky is pretty strong. It does not go back to the requirement of existing business.
Well, at the time, of course, like a lot of other people, I thought our laws were adequate. In spite of all the tragedy that was there, out of it grew a passing of one of the strongest building codes in America for Kentucky.
John Davidson, who didn't get to sing that night at Beverly Hills, finally did sing in the area 4 months later at a fundraiser. Although the fundraiser failed to raise much money for the victims, 8 years of lawsuits did, led by attorney Stan Chesley.
Clearly, after the fire, when the dust had settled, the eye was really on the Schillings and their responsibility, and they would have been referred to in legal parlance as the target defendant. Well, that target defendant only had a total of $1,300,000 worth of coverage, and here you had 165 people.
Chesley sued an unprecedented 1,100 companies. The litigation has become the model for future mass disaster cases. The lawsuits brought in nearly $50 million, more than anyone ever thought. But no amount could repair the damage done that night.
The fire has really, made me realize how fragile life is and how, just one night your whole life can be changed.
Friday, Lazarus will take you from day into...
Somehow, I think that you and I must be two of the last reporters who were here that night who are still reporting in Cincinnati.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And it's just incredible to relive it, I tell you.
Now, was right. This was the cabaret room, of course, back here. Now,
right. That's right.
So the stage would have been facing this way, and Walter Bailey would have come up on that stage right back in there.
That's right, and he told them there's a fire in the kitchen, a small kitchen fire.
You know, that took a lot of guts. There were two professional comedians working then.
That's
and
right.
He went right up and interrupted him, just a kid.
That's right.
It took a lot of guts.
At age 18.
Yeah.
And fortunately showed the people, here are the exits, and pointed.
So to the 1,000 of them got out. 140 didn't. But 1,000 did.
It was only a job, the kind most 18-year-olds have. $1.10 an hour and tips. Walter Bailey had been a busboy at Beverly Hills almost a year when that fire happened.
Can I have a quote on Coca-Cola, please?
Today, he is a stockbroker with a local firm. Some would call him a hero, for this timid busboy was the first one to act that night, clearing the cabaret room, an act that many say saved hundreds of lives.
I knew that the room had to be cleared, that it had to be done quickly in case the fire got out of hand. At that point, the impression was not that we had a fire that was out of hand, per se, but I knew the potential existed, so therefore I just made the decision to do it myself. The next thing that went through my head, as I was walking to the stage, I was gathering my thoughts on what I was going to say. So during the time that I walked from one end of the room to the other, I gathered my thoughts on what I was going to say, and basically it was just pointing out the exits, telling people there was a fire in the building, that it was at the front of the building, and to leave the building through those exits.
As I remember, when Walter came flying up on the stage, everybody thought he was in the act. And he made mention, he said, there's a fire out in the hallway, so we better exit. We all started looking, and no one took heed on it, so he mentioned it again. Then when the smoke came in, then they all started going out on the exits.
In your mind, Walter Bailey, what can we thank him for 10 years later?
Oh, goodness, it wasn't for him, quite a few more would die. I'm quite sure of that. I thought he was a fine, great hero.
Walter once had aspirations of becoming a doctor, but said he found it impossible to follow that dream. He told me he wasn't sure if it was the fire or what, but in the years to follow, he developed a distaste for hospitals, all human suffering.
How do you think you've changed?
I think that I really had to search real hard for what possibly might have changed as a result of the fire. And I think that I developed a different attitude about the bad things that can happen in life, not to let those things get you down. Those things are going to happen. It's just part of life and living, and you can let it get you down, or you can continue and live a happy life. And so that's just one, milestone in my life where I've had to cope with it and live and continue and not let something like that hold me down or keep me back or keep me from living a fulfilling life, a happy life.
And then the next day I started getting calls from newspapers and reporters.
Reporters sought out Walter Bailey, something that made him uncomfortable. He says the National Enquirer even wanted to hypnotize him for an interview, and that, for him, was the last straw.
I'm hoping that this is really the last of this whole thing, really, that this is it, that after this 10-year anniversary that we'll move on. I mean, I think it's nice to, I'm really hoping that what people will do is look back on this fire and keeping in mind, what happened, and think more in terms of, what can we do to prevent something like this in the future.
Though many call him a hero for what this once shy busboy did, it is a title he also finds disturbing.
Hero is, to me, I don't know, it's associated with either wars or basketball games, and it's not really, a fire and a lot of deaths. And
what are you then?
I'm a person that did what I had to do, I think, and I did it as well as I could, I think, and that's about it.
All these people, I'd been to the Supper Club many times. Everybody had been up here. This is the showplace of the nation, they called it.
It was.
And then to see all these people in their finest ball gowns here for a night out on the evening.
It was grotesque. It was grotesque. It was a bizarre grotesquerie, and it didn't compute,
They put napkins on their faces.
I remember that.
And coats on their faces because they didn't have anything else.
You know the one I think about? There was a lady right out here. Somebody had put a tablecloth across her. I never saw her face.
Mm-hmm.
All I saw was there was a chiffon dress and silver shoes that came out from under there. And every time I got tired of doing this story, every time I got sick of it, and the people would write me letters saying how sick they were of us doing Beverly Hills stories and who cares about these fire codes. And every time I'd think about that lady. I'd think about what she was thinking about when she put those silver shoes on and came to see John Davidson, and what really ended up in her life, And she's the lady that kept us on this story. And also, you kept us on this story.
The people who were in the club Saturday night came from a wide area of Kentucky and Ohio, but there are some communities that have borne an even heavier burden of grief than others.
Wayne Township, Ohio, just outside of Jacksonburg, population 52. Farming is still a way of life.
It's found in Europe and even here in the United States in Arizona. The third picture is something you can find around here, and it's...
Generations of people are raised together. Community activities center around church and school.
Read the first question, Doctor.
An area so small to have lost so many at Beverly Hills. 13 friends and neighbors. 6 worked at Wayne Elementary School, a third of the staff.
Community so small that teachers found themselves teaching the children of former students.
13 people among 37 from the local school district who squeezed into the cabaret room to see John Davidson, a retirement party for teacher Ona Mae Mayfield. Front tables were taken. They moved to the back and talked about what they would do in case of a fire. Maurice Ittle, who was superintendent of the Edgewood School District at the time and who was at the Beverly Hills Supper Club that night, said when Walter Bailey took the microphone and announced there was a fire, staffers did what they had done many times at school fire drills. They remained calm. They did not push or shove. They filed out toward the exits. Mr. Ittle believes that's one reason why so many died. He was separated from his wife when someone shoved a table between them. He told me he passed out and has no idea who pulled him out. His wife died.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you in prayer, a confused, stunned, and saddened people. As darkness begins to descend upon our land, it blends in well with the darkness of our grief.
I can't second guess anyone, particularly, the maker, but I guess he had some reasons why those 13 didn't make it and why the other artists did make it. The little things, material things, they no longer were important to me, and I was very appreciative that someone had saw fit to, to spare my life and to, to allow me to live at least a little while longer.
Mildred Abner also survived the fire. She still teaches at Wayne Elementary School. One of her students is Donald Kuntz, named after his grandfather who died at Beverly Hills. Mildred, who did not want to talk about the fire, said she often thinks of Donald and Dorothy when she looks at her young student and his sister, Jamie.
I was very confident that if anybody got out, it would be my mom and dad, because my dad was a very strong man.
He was a firefighter also. I felt like if anybody could get out, I felt the same as her. If anybody could get out, then I knew he would.
Two of Dorothy and Donald Kuntz's 6 children. After they died, their only son, 26-year-old Randy, moved into the family home.
Him and his wife moved into the house, and she was pregnant, and he was our guardian, and he took over, and we really love him for that.
I felt like I was cheated. That's a good word for it. I use that a lot when I talk about it. I felt like I was cheated out of some good years. And memories, being able to do things with the family like all my other siblings did.
I saw the good in people through all that tragedy, the pouring in of food and cards and love and support.
We all respect each other. We were all close before, and we got closer.
So many husbands and wives died together, and now there are so many new orphans.
It's sad, and it's a sad time for us. These are the people that you'd see everywhere because it's such a small community and they were part of everything. And when we lost so many, it left an emptiness that's really, it's a void. It's never, ever filled.
Still now.
Still now. They were a group of people who, when you think about them now, you don't think so much of the tragedy any longer, but you think of the good memories and the good times that you had and the good things that you shared with them.
Kool-Aid stands for lots of great taste and a whole lot more. Kool-Aid.
You spent an awful lot of time then, and you've spent a lot of time since trying to figure out what would change, what's different now because of this. A lot of things are different.
Yes, in fact, it alerted the Cincinnati Fire Department to something that they had not done, which was to put room occupancy maximum.
Everybody sees that now.
In signs, that's right.
We didn't see that before.
In fact, you said how many people should have been in the cabaret room?
629.
And they had, by one account, up to 1,300, by another count, over 1,000. About double.
About double.
And so the Cincinnati Fire Department says, This got them into gear to require signs posted in every building in Cincinnati, even though they thought this could not happen here. You remember the interviews.
Oh, sure.
So, Lou Giannani said, oh, no, it could not happen in Cincinnati. No, 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 we are much stricter about it. But they didn't even have the signs posted as to occupancy
They did
maximums.
a lot of changing. They did a lot of changing. A lot of people retrofitted on sprinklers. Remember that? That
Yes.
was a big thing for a while there.
And why were there no sprinklers in here? Well, because, that's right. They had done a major renovation after another fire back in 1970, but the renovation wasn't more than 50%. Therefore, they didn't have to do it, and they didn't. They didn't. They could have, and they could have even have put alarms in, but they didn't do that. No smoke detectors either.
Now you have to do it.
Exactly. And one restaurateur says he spent thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, changing his restaurants after this fire. That restaurateur, Ben Bernstein, bought Mike Fink 4 months after the fire. He immediately installed about $100,000 worth of fire protection equipment.
Right in the heart of the cooking area, all of these things, these sensors up in the exhaust area are sensing for heat and flame. And as you can see, everything is protected all along. I don't know in the old days how they operated without things like this, without safety devices like these.
Do most places have this type of thing now?
Certainly the new ones that are building all are required to have this sophisticated equipment. 10 years ago, before that, I would say 1 in 20 restaurants possibly could have had it, maybe the bigger and newer ones. I know our Greco didn't have it.
Is Kentucky hard on you?
Kentucky's reputedly the second toughest state in the union after California.
In enforcement?
In enforcement and in code requirement. I suspect it's part of the legacy of that tragedy.
10 years ago, there was just this gangplank.
Basically one exit out of the restaurant.
What's the capacity?
425 people.
So you really do need several ways to get out.
Oh yeah, you can imagine all 400 people trying to get out of one door, and then you know what happens.
So this was not enclosed?
No, none of this was enclosed. This was open to the dining room. It was very gracious and lovely. But
fire trap.
But a fire trap or a fire tunnel. This way, once the door is closed, the air is cut off and the fire is contained wherever it is, whether it's on the other side or here, it's contained.
And that's one of the problems they have at Beverly Hills, because there was no enclosure around that spiral staircase.
No, they were like big chimneys, those stairwells, without the enclosures.
And that's what made the fire move so rapidly.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Beverly Hills could happen again.
Despite what Ben Bernstein has done to his restaurant, the president of the Kentucky Firefighters Association notes sprinkler systems still are not required for older buildings. And the job of inspections is being shifted to local, sometimes inexperienced departments, he says, because the state fire marshal's office doesn't have enough inspectors.
If you just look at the size of the state of Kentucky and just drive across the river and look at the number of new construction just in northern Kentucky alone, I don't see how 13 inspectors would be enough to do the physical inspection of all those buildings.
Sometimes we don't learn lessons, and I remember immediately after the fire, every restaurant was very careful not to overcrowd. Every hotel, the fire marshals went through every hotel, discos, to make sure they weren't overcrowded. But I would hate to take a look at some of those hotels and some of those restaurants today.
How many night spots in Greater Cincinnati? How many events occur, that it's Friday night or Saturday night or New Year's Eve or Mother's Day, that somebody doesn't make an extra tip of $10 or $15 to get another seat or to give space for me to get into the establishment. And that's going to be an ongoing problem forever.
grand jury said no one was criminally responsible. The civil jury said the cause was aluminum wiring. So what are we left with? Here's what we're left with. The greatest safety device of all, your common sense. If you walk into a public place, before you sit down, look how you're going to get out of there. After you sit down, look up. See if there are any sprinklers. And if there aren't, ask them why. And if it's too crowded, turn on your heels and get out of there. And if anybody asks you why, tell them you've got 165 very good reasons.